Hey, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Shanae, and today we're going to talk about all things meringue. Meringue is basically whipped egg whites stabilized with sugar and acid. And it's used in many different kinds of desserts like sponge cake, angel food cake, pavlova cake, which is my favorite cake. And you can make meringue cookies, soufflés, mousses, and macarons. In today's video, we're going to talk about a little bit about science behind the meringue, 3 methods of making meringue, stages of meringue, but we're mostly going to talk about French meringue. French meringue is the weakest of all types of meringues. Before we get started, there are a lot of do's and don'ts when it comes to meringue. And to understand those rules, we need to understand the science behind how it works. Egg whites are made of 10% of protein and 90% of water. When we whisk egg whites, we incorporate air bubbles into the liquid, and proteins in the egg whites, they unfold and create a nice strong network protecting those air bubbles from bursting. If those egg whites gets in contact with any kind of fat or egg yolk, they compromise the structure of the meringue because fat molecules like air bubbles, and then they push the proteins from the air bubbles and pop them instead of preventing them from popping. This is why it's very important to keep your utensils like bowls, whisks, even your hands, if you are separating your egg whites with your hands, to keep them grease-free and stay away any kinds of fat. And when you're breaking the egg whites, make sure to not have any egg yolks in your egg whites. When you whisk the egg whites and incorporate air bubbles and the proteins wrap around the air bubbles protecting them, this protein-wrapped air bubbles are very weak and not stable, and they break down really easily. And that's why it's important to add acid and sugar to make it more stable. When we add acid, like cream of tartar or lemon juice or vinegar, they help slow down the formation of the protein networks, which in return creates more stable meringue. And also when we add sugar, sugar dissolves and makes the liquid around those air bubbles sticky and prevents the water from draining quickly and makes the meringue stable. And depending on the amount of sugar, it will depend the strength of the meringue. The more sugar you add, the more stable and strong your meringue is going to be. Rule of thumb, each egg white could hold up to 50 grams of sugar, and which is pretty a lot. But we're going to use 2 egg whites and 75 grams of sugar, which creates pretty stable meringue. Another role sugar plays in the meringue is the more sugar you have, the less chances you have to overwhip the meringue. When you have less sugar, you could easily overwhip the egg whites. Overwhipped meringue gets grainy and the water separates. So you will get this grainy, textured egg whites with liquid separated. And I'm going to show you how to fix that in a little bit. And there are 3 methods to making meringue. Swiss meringue is when you combine the sugar and egg whites and cook it over water bath slowly up to bringing it to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you whip it. It's a really beautiful meringue, and I use it for Swiss meringue buttercream, which is really delicious, light and fluffy buttercream. Another method to making meringue is Italian meringue. Italian meringue is the most stable meringue, but it's the most complicated because we cook sugar syrup on the stovetop and pour it slowly into the whipping egg whites. This is because it's cooked meringue, it's very stable and works beautifully for topping the pies and also great for macarons. And the last method is French method. Is basically you add sugar, granulated sugar into whipping egg whites to create a fluffy meringue. Now this is the least stable meringue, but I have a few tips and tricks to keep it stronger. Now let's go ahead and make it together. So I will show you 3 stages of the meringue: foamy stage, soft peak, and stiff peaks, also known as hard peaks. And I'll also show you how it looks when you overwhip the egg whites and how to fix it. So first we're going to separate the egg whites, and I usually use the shells to separate them, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It's really easy. The most important thing is separate the egg whites when they're cold, because egg yolk is firmer and it doesn't break really easy. However, room temperature egg whites whip better, so I recommend separating your eggs right away and then wait for 30 minutes to bring it to room temperature. So what I do is I separate egg whites one at a time. I separate in a small bowl and then transfer into the mixing bowl. So that way, if you accidentally break an egg yolk, you're not going to ruin your whole batch of egg whites. Really carefully, and tap it on the counter instead of on the edge of the bowl, because that way your shells will stay on the white film of the eggshell and you won't get any shells in your egg whites too. See how easy it was? I just transferred between the shells to get as much egg whites, and make sure there's no egg yolk in your whites. Otherwise, it will compromise the structure of your egg whites and you won't get nice stable meringue. So I have my egg whites in the bowl, and one of the main things that I like to do with my French meringue is to whip the egg whites low and slow on a consistent speed. You can choose 2 or 4, and that creates very small bubbles, slowly unravels the proteins, which will create a stronger network around the bubbles. Again, the science stuff. And I like it to use on a low speed, and then I'll show you when it reaches the foamy stage, and then we'll add the acid. This is how it looks when it's foamy. So my egg whites are nice and foamy, and I'm going to add the cream of tartar. You can actually add the cream of tartar right away, but I like to add it when it's nice and foamy. I'm also going to start adding sugar 1 tablespoon at a time. It's very, very important to add the sugar a little bit at a time. If you dump the sugar all at once, you will burst all these air bubbles that we worked on creating, and we don't want that. We want to add sugar 1 tablespoon at a time, allowing the sugar to dissolve easily. Another tip is use nice and fine sugar, so that it dissolves easier. If you have, I use granulated sugar, but caster sugar or superfine sugar works great. If you have coarse sugar, I would advise to run it in the food processor to make it finer. It's just allows the sugar to dissolve quickly and creates a really nice stable meringue without grittiness. So the meringue is beautiful, glossy, because the sugar stabilizes the egg whites. They get this beautiful shine. This is called soft peak stage because, as you can see, the peak is soft. It's also called a bird's peak, and it droops a little bit. And this is perfect for sponge cakes. So my meringue should be pretty much ready. Let's check it out. Yep, I love when the meringue balls up in the middle of the whisk like so. And as you can see, it has nice and pointy ends, exactly how you would like to see. And I also noticed here the ridges are nice and sharp. And these are the good signs that the meringue is perfect for my macarons or for meringue cookies. I think this is way too far for, like, if you're making angel food cake, for example, it's too stiff, and you don't want this stiff batter for your meringue. Otherwise, your angel food cake will come out dense, and you don't want that. But this is the perfect stage for macarons. Do you see how the end is nice and pointy? This is exactly how you want to see it. And another tip, again, nice sharp ridges. You want this sharp ridges here. It's almost unlikely that you will overwhip meringue when there's 2-to-1 ratio to sugar to egg whites. Let me just show you what happens when meringue is overwhipped. And if you overwhip the egg whites a little bit, you can save it by adding another egg white and just whip it slowly, and then you should be able to salvage the meringue when it's slightly overbeaten. But if it's too much, then there's no salvage. But I'm going to show you how it looks like when it's overwhipped, okay? So the meringue is overbeaten and it looks really watery and gritty. And if you would like to fix it, go ahead and add an egg white and gently stir it until it gets glossy again. And I hope you will never get to this point. Just keep an eye on it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, leave me in the comments. And if you would like to make my French macaron recipe, go ahead and watch the next video. And I also have a ton of meringue-based recipes on my website. And also, if you have extra egg yolks, also visit my website for more delicious recipes incorporating those egg yolks. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.